My name is Anna. I'm 32 years old and I spent 11 years saving $95,000 for a house. When my family found out, they sat me down at a dinner and told me all of them had already agreed my down payment should go to my sister instead. I set down my spoon, looked at my father, and said, "Fine, on one condition." What I said next made every smile at that table disappear. If you truly love and appreciate your parents, take just 1 second to subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to us. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? 11 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, cheap apartments with broken heaters, a savings account I treated like it was sacred. When it finally hit 95,000, I didn't celebrate. I just sat at my kitchen table and cried quietly because I knew what it meant. No landlord could ever tell me I had 30 days to leave again. My baby, 7 months along and already kicking hard enough to keep me up at night, would come home to something that actually belonged to us. I'd found the house already. 3 bedrooms, good school district, an old oak tree in the backyard I'd already imagined her climbing someday. The paperwork was moving. I hadn't told my family the full details yet, just that I was buying a place before the baby came. I thought they'd be proud. I was wrong about a lot of things that year. The dinner was my mother's idea, called a family meeting, which should have been my first warning. My parents, my older sisters, Renata, her boyfriend Graham, and my uncle Theodore were all there. My mother's lamb stew was on the table, warm and familiar, and I let myself relax into it, which was exactly what they needed me to do. My father spoke first, in that calm, even voice he uses for delivering terrible news. He said Renata was in a difficult financial spot, that family supports family. I nodded, still not understanding where it was going. Then he said it, that all of them, him, my mother, Theodore, had already agreed my down payment money should go to Renata for a fresh start. I didn't move for a moment. I just sat there with my hands over my stomach, feeling my daughter shift inside me, thinking I'd misheard him. I asked him to repeat it. Same calm voice, same words, like it was already decided, like I was simply being informed. Renata wouldn't look at me, just examined her fork. Graham leaned back like a man with nothing to lose in this conversation. My mother kept her eyes on her plate. Theodore nodded slowly, like an elder blessing, an arrangement that had already been settled before it reached the table. The old version of me would have cried, would have started explaining and begging them to see reason. But 11 years of working and saving entirely alone had hardened something in me into something useful. I didn't raise my voice. I set down my spoon, looked directly at my father, and said, "Fine, on one condition." The table went completely quiet. My mother finally looked up. Even Graham sat forward slightly. I think they expected me to negotiate, ask for a repayment plan, ask to keep a portion. They didn't expect what came next. And what I told them in the next 10 seconds changed the entire room. I told them the condition. Before any of you touch a single dollar of that money, you need to understand something I haven't told you yet. I let the silence sit just long enough to get uncomfortable. I don't have a down payment anymore. I used it 6 weeks ago. The house closed on the 14th. I already own it. The deed's been in my name for over a month. Nobody spoke. My father blinked. My mother set down her fork slowly. Renata finally looked at me, and it wasn't anger yet. It was the specific look of someone recalculating something they'd assumed was already settled. Every smile at that table vanished. Graham cleared his throat. Theodore shifted in his seat. My father started to say something, stopped, started again, asking why I hadn't told them. I said I'd been waiting for the right moment, which was the polite version of the truth. The real truth was that some part of me, buried under all that trust and family loyalty, had already known I needed to protect myself from them before they even showed me why. Renata said my name low and sharp. I looked at my older sister, who'd left her 2 kids with her ex to follow Graham to a city she didn't know, who'd burned through her own savings in under a year, who had shown up expecting to walk away with money I had bled for over a decade. And I didn't feel angry and I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt tired and finally completely clear. I pushed back my chair, picked up my bag, and stood. 7 months pregnant, a mortgage in my own name, with nothing left at that table for anyone to take from me. "I'm going home to my house," I said, and walked out. The drive home was the quietest I've ever known. No radio, no calls, just the road and my daughter shifting inside me like she already knew we were headed somewhere safe. I kept both hands on the wheel and didn't cry. I decided somewhere between that dinner table and my front door that I was done spending tears on people who looked at my life's work and saw a resource to divide up. I pulled into my own driveway, sat there a few minutes, looking at the cream-colored siding and the porch light I'd left on. Nobody else had a key to that door but me. My phone started within the hour. My mother first, then my father, then an unknown number that turned out to be Theodore calling from his wife's phone since he'd apparently already been blocked. I let all of them go to voicemail, made chamomile tea, sat surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and listened to the messages on speaker while I rubbed my stomach. My mother's message called it a misunderstanding, said my father had expressed things poorly, said the family had only been brainstorming options. That word landed in my chest like a stone. They'd sat me down at a formal dinner, presented a unanimous decision, and were now calling it brainstorming. My father's message was shorter, saying I'd embarrassed the family by walking out, that I'd been dramatic. I deleted it before it finished. Theodore left nothing. Renata texted 4 words, "You could have helped." I read it twice, set the phone face down, and finished my tea. Over the next 2 weeks, things quietly unraveled from a distance. Renata, it turned out, had already told Graham the money was essentially coming, and he'd already told a leasing office they'd have funds by month's end. When that didn't happen, Graham simply stopped returning her calls and was seen 2 weeks later with someone else entirely. My mother told me this is expecting sympathy. I felt something, I just couldn't honestly call it that. My parents showed up at my house on a Saturday morning unannounced, my mother carrying rice and fruit, which is how my family signals they want something. I let them in, because I was raised to let my parents in, but I stood in my own kitchen and felt the difference between who I'd been at that dinner table and who I was now, on my own ground. My father opened with an apology that was mostly an explanation. Times were hard for Renata. They hadn't meant to corner me. Family needed to stay united, especially with a baby coming. He never once said the words, "We were wrong." My mother kept glancing around my house with an expression somewhere between appreciation and a hunger that made me want to close the curtains. I told them both, calmly, without drama, that I loved them, that I intended to have a relationship with them, that my daughter would know her grandparents. But that what happened at that dinner had shown me something I couldn't unsee, and going forward, my finances, my property, my decisions were not family business. No more meetings where my assets got discussed like I wasn't in the room. My door would stay open to them as family, but never again as a committee. My mother started crying. My father looked at the floor. They left an hour later, my mother hugging me a little longer than usual at the door, whispering that she was proud of me. I think she meant it. I think she was also quietly afraid of me. People often become afraid of someone they underestimated, and that fear was probably the most honest thing she'd offered me in years. 3 months later, I gave birth to my daughter 2 miles from my house. I named her Nora and brought her home to the pale yellow nursery I'd painted myself, in the house that was entirely mine, on a street where nobody got a vote in what happened next except me. My parents came to meet her on a Tuesday afternoon. My father held her like something precious and breakable, clearing his throat every few minutes. My mother sat beside me on the couch, quiet for a long time, just watching Nora sleep. Then she said softly, "You did good, Anna.